Perfect. Okay, thank you everybody for holding tight with us there. A couple technical difficulties. Only thing we really missed was the Respect the Inbox webinar slide here. I'll just go ahead and I'll go back really fast here just to kind of show Lisa and myself.
That's good because we've actually picked up some more attendees.
Excellent. So technical difficulties bought us a little bit of time. Thank you for bearing with us, everybody. My name is Robert Schweikert. I'm your host today with co-host Lisa Fletcher. We're going to go ahead and jump into some of our slides here. Bear with us. So for those of you who would like to join in the conversation, you're welcome to do so through the control panel here, through your questions box, or go ahead and tweet your responses using the hashtag #BenchmarkLive. We do have representatives that are available to answer and address all types of questions that you may have. So feel free to go ahead and ask them as they come about. So what is Respect the Inbox? So Respect the Inbox is an acronym that we've created for respect. And we're going to be in the 5th letter here of evaluate. So this is the 5th week of our 7-week series revolving around the topics of how to respect the inbox. And so this is really going to encompass a lot of different attributes to deliverability. So today we're going to go through evaluating. We have a really great topic here, a couple of important things to cover. Let's go ahead and just jump into that and get started. So we were mentioning a minute ago KPIs, and these are the key performance indicators. Lisa was just mentioning a really great point is that when we think about these key performance indicators, is think about the overall goal of your email campaign. What's the story that you're telling? What's the narrative? How are you guiding your customers or subscribers? Where are you guiding them to? Are you trying to get them to sign up to something, purchase something, just providing information? Really think about that, and then that's going to help you understand what are the things, the attributes of your campaign that are going to indicate performance, whether it's good or bad. What are those pivoting points? So we have a couple of those key examples here. I was mentioning before that we have the general performance of the email campaign, and then we have the general effectiveness. Now, these two metrics, one of which is going to be something included in all of your reports. That's all the basic bare bones kind of stuff. Open rate, click through, unsubscribes, that kind of stuff. And then your effectiveness, this is where it's going to be taking into account your conversion rate. So again, these are going to be types of things that you want to think about. What is your goal? What are the things that they're going to be doing? If they're clicking to go to a product page, was your email designed to showcase information about that product, to build demand to get them to go through? And so maybe your conversion rate is a little bit more important than just the click-through itself. So kind of keep those in mind. Lisa was giving us a scenario a minute ago about what are some of the key things to really focus on a general email campaign. Do you want to kind of go through, the normal type of email campaign? So we can go over something like a newsletter or a promotion,
right,
and use that as a scenario.
Okay, so say you have a promotion, right? You're doing a promotion and you have people coming through and you get to see how many people are opening it. That one's pretty simple. But from that point on, a lot of people get a little confused. So they're not certain where to place their call to action. Okay, so you want to keep that simple, right? So that way you'll be able to track it better. If you have too many calls to action, you're not going to be able to understand what's working for you. Keep it simple. Then as you note that call to action, you're going to get that click-through rate. And you should understand based on how many people opened, not how many people that you sent to, but how many people you opened, what that click-through rate should be, right? Exactly. And so if you're doing really well, the click-through rate should be about 50%. If you're doing at 10%, that's actually considered average, and you could be anywhere within that range. So that's one way to understand how well you're performing. That will basically show the effectiveness of what you're doing.
Yeah, another prime example of this as well would be an increase in unsubscribes as well. When we think about when you're seeing an unsubscribe, that's respectfully declining receiving further information from you. But this can be something that if you see a spike in that, now it could be generally the type of content that you've been sending regularly. If it wasn't really hitting the right note with your subscriber, that could turn them off to your products and services and your marketing altogether, and they could just opt out and just want to be out of that. And if you see a lot of people that are doing that, if they've signed up through like a Facebook sign up form to your blog, and your blog was talking about X, Y, and Z, but you start talking about A, B, and C, you're not really aligning with that same narrative that you had. And so the people who initially signed up to you may be off put, and it may not be something that they're quite interested in anymore. And that may be a prime example of something to look at if people are unsubscribing in a large amount, if they're leaving your list in a large amount. So, let's kind of talk a little bit more about the effectiveness. Now, I briefly touched on the overall ROI, and that's your return of investment. Now, your return of investment can be quantified in a couple different ways. Of course, it's going to be quantified in a dollar amount. That's the easiest way, but it can also be time that you spend as well, and time that you earn back. So when we think about the effectiveness of an email, if it's goal-based towards getting revenue, then you're going to look at the amount of time that you put in to build the content, the number of subscribers the content was displayed to, and the overall success of who actually purchased and completed that purchase. That'd be something to easily quantify with that. But if we're looking in terms of like automations tend to save you lots of time on top of helping you generate more revenue as well. So that's something else that can be measured or scaled when we think about the general return of your investment. So getting more time back in your day to allow you to focus on bigger tasks instead of having to constantly evaluate and create and manage more things. Creating automations helps. Basically, it's like having an assistant. And a well-placed automation is like having an assistant that helps you effectively you market your content. Conversion rates as well. Go ahead.
So I'm getting people every day to convert basically to using automations more, because you can take a basic scenario where you're trying to engage people and use automation and continue to use that over time. And then if you just need to tweak it, you're able to do that. So you can make some changes to your automation over time. You set it in place. It's going to help you better target and get better performance, and then understand that performance and understand what's working for you.
Great example. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a few minutes. Lastly, here we have our social interactions and new leads generated. So again, effectiveness of campaigns. If you're seeing that you had a lot of new leads that came in, maybe from your Facebook sign-up form, your WordPress sign-up form, wherever that might be, and you get them into your newsletter, you start sending out, keeping people on your list and growing that subscriber list. You may see a lot of people may just jump on your list for a few emails and then they're out. They jump in, they get their percentage off, they get whatever you were offering in exchange for the sign up, versus like these real new leads that are generated, people who stick on your list for a longer period of time, gives you more of the ability of being able to nurture that lead and really start to get that to go through into a conversion. And the same thing goes when we think about social interactions as well. Blog posts, newsletters, things like that. You may notice that you have the ability of being able to place a social follow or a social like button or share within your emails as well. And these are very much like call to action, but they can really take the conversation outside of email marketing and into platforms that people are already in, where you hold a presence, like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, things like that.
So I have an example where you can actually determine how well you're performing. So imagine that you have a Facebook page and you're sending your followers to your sign-up form, right? So you know how many followers you have. You'll be able to track how many people are going through your sign-up form, and then watching your emails and clicking through, and maybe further sharing from those emails if you add the share. That's a good way to understand how you're performing.
Yes. All right, let's continue here. So let's talk a little bit more about some of the click-throughs. Now, we're going to talk about click-to-open rate in a little bit, but click-through rates. Now, I like to kind of go through some of the images that we have here, and we're talking about an example of a typical promotions type of email that may just have one or two items that are showcased on that. For one, placement of your call to action is really important when we think about this. So when you see your click-through rate, and we kind of had a little bit of debate on, what we believe, what we see most subscribers see. And generally speaking, I liked how Lisa corrected me earlier, is that, we typically see, when you think about your open rate, think about people who click through are generally going to be anywhere from about, I don't know, a couple of percent to maybe 25%. If you're doing greater than that, that means you're really targeting really well, and people are engaged with your email marketing, and you're really hitting the nail on the head. You're doing great. And we were saying that typically when we see an average email marketer, when we think about the scenario of a newsletter, newsletters are typically designed to give them enough information, but you're going to have those read more articles where you get them back on your website. You really want people to read enough on the email to become interested to get on the website where you do a lot of your selling, and you're going to have a lot of other resources available to them where you're limited in an email. What we always see is I see tons of people trying to cram everything into a newsletter. Your newsletter ends up being pages long, and it's too big. A great way of really seeing if people are engaged, did they read it all the way? Having a call to action for them to continue reading, at least you know that they read whatever you had there, plus they were interested enough to click through to read more about it. So that's a good way of being able to quantify and scale the success, is thinking about something like that. Lisa, you were talking earlier about general metrics when we think about these, and that kind of brought up the conversation around what is something that we should generally expect as a marketer from like a promotions campaign or even a newsletter. What's something that you would think that you would be expecting?
Okay, so it's something that you're expecting when you're email marketing. So imagine you're not certain who your audience is yet. Okay, so you're going to send an email and you want to try to gather a little more information. What are you expecting? In that instance, you might have one more call to action, but you still don't want too many. You want to track those. Say you have some questions in there and they have buttons linked to them to let people know if they're interested in this or that. Keep it simple. That way, if they click through and when they click through, you're going to better understand what's going on. That's a good way to understand the performance of how you're doing.
Yeah.
So that wasn't really clear. What I mean by that.
Think about the percentage of people who've opened versus the people who actually click through and read everything.
Right. Okay. Percentage wise. Sorry.
It's okay.
Okay. So you have an email and you send it out, and you percentage wise when you're getting back, right? You're hoping that you're above the average. You want to be above 10% in your opens. And then if you're doing well, right? Again, maybe you're getting a 25% click-through rate. And then what you want to do then, okay, that is a start indicating you're going in the right direction.
Yeah.
But that's not the end all, right? It may not be the end all. Even if they've gone through and purchased your product, you want to keep them on your list.
Yeah.
So you would continue to track their opens and track to see if they click again. And you can do that with the tools within Benchmark.
So it's not just on the campaign itself. You can track the success over a period of time.
Yes.
To see how well or how much more engaged they become with your product even before, after making a purchase.
Correct.
Ideally identifying pretty much where they're at in a buying process. If you really understand the process of which a conversion happens. So if you typically know that it takes 2 or 3 emails before someone makes a purchase, what are the attributes before they make that purchase? So taking into account previous emails that you've sent and understanding what were the interactions that they had versus what they're doing now is the likelihood of where they will be to making a purchase or something like that. So you were mentioning a little bit about targeted emailing, one of the underrated features. I don't know why people don't use it more often, but targeted emailing is a segment tool. It's a segmentation tool, allowing you to target people based off of KPIs, these key performance indicators. So very important. One of the things that I love about it is that you can reference up to 50 of your past campaigns. It doesn't have to be 50 of the last consecutive campaigns. It could be any 50 of any of your last campaigns. So you can really dive into really understanding what are these trends? How can we capitalize on these? And are people still engaged with the product, with not just your product, but with your email marketing? Are they engaged with your brand? Where are they at in the buying process? I love how you mentioned that. I always forget to talk about targeted emailing, and it is underrated and very powerful tool.
It is. So I have a lot of people who've been with us for a while. And they'll come and they'll ask me questions and I'll say, well, I don't know, let's take a look. And basically they've gotten used to trying to get that information from reports, and the reports have all that information, but you don't necessarily have to crunch it, right? If you use the targeted emailing tool, you're going to be able to take 10 of those last 50 campaigns, take a look at, are they opening? Are they not opening? Are they clicking through? What are they clicking through on?
Yeah.
And then you can create a list based on that. And so that way, if you don't necessarily have data about what they're interested in the contact list, you're going to have it in the targeted email.
Yeah, and definitely, that helps you drill down onto specifics. When you were talking about that, it made me it reminded me of something else, another feature that's also underrated as well. And I'm just going to go back one slide really quick, just to look at this image here of the buy now, click me now, and click here. A prime example of understanding. So one thing that I noticed with emails that Benchmark sends out, only recently did I notice that the Benchmark logo in the email is actually something that people click on all the time. And it's not even a call to action. The call to action will be an actual button, something like this, as buy now, click here, but people are still clicking the image, and that image takes them to the homepage. And so with respect to that, when we look into our reports, there's a section there it's called your heat map. And you actually have to go into the click performance section. And this is a really great feature. It's been added. It's been for a while now.
It's been there for a while.
It's been for a while now, but it had recently somewhat been added. And the idea behind this is that you're going to see a heat map of the email that you have, and it's going to give you a percentage of where people are actually clicking. Very much like your click-through rate, which is just the percentage of all who were on the list that clicked through, versus when you're looking right at the email, it's going to give you a little percentage. Okay, people clicking on this, 50%, people are clicking on that. And when you have these call to actions, let's say you have multiple call to actions to the same thing, you may notice that people are more inclined to clicking one over the other. So maybe deleting one of those might be in your best interest to just focus on something smaller. And we're talking about creating something less rather than having more. That Benchmark logo was something that I noticed that was something clicked all the time. So the placement of that and letting people know that took them to the home screen or the login screen, we actually started to see a higher level of success from that.
Right, and if you haven't seen any of these yet, it could be if you're looking on the report itself and you go to the section where you can check the links, scroll down, because that
all the way at the bottom.
The reports are longer than they immediately appear. So scroll down to see if you have more than one link. You're going to be able to see the percentages there, but it's going to also show you where are people really interested. Where is their eye catching? Where are they coming to you through?
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that. So we backtracked a little bit there. But now moving forward, we're going to start talking a little bit about conversion rates. Now, conversion rates can mean a number of things to you. Now, when we think about the goal of the email campaign or the series of emails that you have, the conversion rate most of the time is going to be signing up to something, purchasing something, completing some type of form or action for you. If it's getting feedback, getting that feedback can be your conversion. Signing up to a webinar or registering for something, that is the conversion you're looking for. So you really want to understand what the end goal is. If you're thinking about your newsletter, for instance, maybe a conversion rate is getting people onto your website. So like the scenario I was mentioning before, giving that little introductory paragraph to an article, but leaving the real meat of it on the website, maybe to your blog, something like that, where the idea is to get them off the newsletter and onto your blog page or onto your website. So that might be your conversion right there. It's just getting more page visitors. That's something else to understand.
Right, a good way to implement that is you can either give them an opening paragraph and then link to the site, or you can give a summary of the article and then use a button with say, more here or something about read on the button, and then that'll help you understand. You're going to get that information in the report, and it's going to help your website overall by driving people to that.
Yeah, and another thing too, because I know we keep talking about bloggers and people who are sending newsletters, it works the same for those who are in retail, selling or creating options for purchasing items, A, B, C, D, whatever those amount of items might be. You might give a little brief description. You don't want to give them everything. Give them enough to where it's that hook. Okay, I want to go to the site. I want to get that in my cart. I want to learn more about it. I want to hear reviews about it. Give them something like that. That's something that you can easily do, and that'll help you understand what is that conversion to getting them onto your page. Now, keeping that same scenario, maybe it's following it all the way through to purchase. So those of you that are utilizing automations and focusing on your key performance indicators, thinking about abandonment carts, or cart abandonment, I should say. I don't know why I'm flip-flopping the words there. Cart abandonment, thinking about those types of emails, that can also really help stimulate this conversion rate, because you're capitalizing on the key performance of getting the item into the cart. But if they haven't completed that purchase in 20 minutes, 30 minutes, a day, whatever that duration of time is, then you're not going to really see and understand how you can really loop them back in to get that conversion. But the prime example of really getting them to make that purchase is what we see with cart abandonment, is that 25% of people who receive a cart abandonment email actually complete the purchase. The placement of that and the timing of it is really important, but that is something that if you're selling products, think about that strategy, that end strategy. How can you get the most out of each one of your campaigns? Automations, again, that's something that it really helps you fully understand what are the steps it takes to get someone to the door to make a purchase. And every customer might be a little bit different, but you're going to see general trends. And those types of trends are definitely things to keep an eye out for. So bounce rate. Now, bounces mean a lot of different things. This is more of the area of expertise of Lisa. She really works with a lot of customers for deliverability. I do as well, but I really ask most of my questions that I can't answer on my own. I direct them to Lisa. So, Lisa, when we think about non-delivered emails, I know they can mean a number of things, but generally, like, where is something that if we see people that are bouncing, what are the general bouncing numbers that you see, and when should people really pay attention to it?
In regards to performance, right? So here we're not talking so much about what types of bounces. We're not going to talk necessarily about solving, because we've done that in other chats. What we want to know is performance-wise, what is the bounce rate doing to me? And is my bounce rate below normal, which would be, under 3%, you're doing great,
Yeah.
If you're over 3%, maybe there's some room for improvement. And so therefore you understand your performance is going to be affected when it comes to your KPI. You're playing your end game here. Yeah. If you're above 10% in bounce rate, you've got some serious problems that you could probably resolve. 10%, it's not unheard of. I've seen people 30%. It's just their practices. Yeah. And so we want to take this information as an understanding of my performance is suffering, and I need to do something about it.
Yeah, definitely. So, one of the scenarios that I always see that happen are, those, I do it too. I might have a list that I haven't emailed to. I do events with Benchmark. We do similar events yearly, and I use the attendees and I market to those attendees to remind them about the event. But I haven't marketed to them since last year at the same time. And one of the things that I noticed when I was a greenhorn coming into email marketing, and I didn't really know what the best practice was for this, I just sent to the list. And because I hadn't been in communication with them throughout the year, it was a cold list. I really didn't know I didn't even know if these people's addresses were valid or not. And what I would see, most of the time in the beginning was I would see 20%, over 10% that were bouncing. And it was really due to a lot of those emails were just no longer valid. List attrition is something that's real in our industry, and we expect most marketers that are growing their list to lose anywhere from 5 to 15, maybe even 25% of their list year after year. And of course, your industry is really going to depend on how that number fluctuates, but always expect to be losing contacts. And if you're not monitoring your bounces and evaluating what are the causes of this, so 3% bounces, you're good. But if you're seeing it creep above 5, and you know that it's not related to DNS error, something like that, it's most likely due to your list not being as clean and healthy as it should be. So cleaning the list regularly, that is something that we highly recommend doing. That is a feature that's built into every one of the lists that you have with Benchmark. So when you see something bouncing above 5%, definitely take a look. Go into your clean list feature, look at the list, and see how many people have been a confirmed bounce. If you see that number has jumped up, get them off your list, remove them. There's no point in holding down that dead weight that's there. And if you're not monitoring over time, you will see something like a 10% bounce rate, especially in the scenario where I emailed a group of individuals that I hadn't contacted in an entire year. Come to find out, I got about 10 or 15% bounce rate, and it was due to a lot of those email addresses that could have been cleared out that weren't. So that's something, a prime example of that.
Right. You want to manage your bounces. So if it's a little overwhelming, just take one thing that we mentioned at a time. But if you address the bounce issue overall, it's going to improve your performance of those that are remaining. You're going to get into the inbox more often, and therefore you can then better target these people because you're not so worrying about your deliverability. So remember, this is one of the first KPIs that you should be taking care of. Once you on top of it, then you're going to be able to spend more time and do better overall on basically watching those open rates and the click-throughs.
Definitely. And so if you're seeing a low open rate, but you're having a pretty high bounce rate, that it is affecting you landing consistently in the inbox. So you definitely want to address this. If you're seeing a lot of bounces, that is really going to change. And you may not be seeing the true or the highest potential of opens and click-throughs because your delivery isn't there. This is something that Lisa sees all the time, and it's something that could easily be remedied if you're paying attention.
Yeah, it's not hard to
and monitoring and staying focused to your bounce rate. That open rate is going to fluctuate, but you should really see that generally be somewhere around 10% and more. And that number really shouldn't jump from 10% to 2% to 5%. If you're sending regularly, it should be the same group of individuals or pretty much the ones that are going to be your people that are most engaged, and that number shouldn't fluctuate. But the bounces, definitely, if you start to see that creep up, go into your list, clean it out. Another thing too that I wanted to briefly mention was for the scenario that I had where I was emailing a list that I got a year ago for an event that I do again this year, something that I now have learned through mistakes I made before is I verify the list. And that verifying a list it provides you peace of mind. Now, list verification and list cleaning are not one and the same at all. They're both different. List verification is done prior to sending an email campaign. List cleaning is done post. It's done after you've already sent. That's cleaning up whatever was missed. But before you send, it's always in your best interest to know before you go and know who exactly are the valid contacts by verifying and weeding out those invalids. That'll help stimulate a low bounce rate and a higher delivery rate, which would hopefully quantify into success, open rate, click-through rate, that kind of thing. All right, let's see here. It looks like we have a couple of questions. So before we keep going, I want to just kind of address this. All right, so I have someone that's asking about, do we let you drop email addresses that are bouncing? Yes. So if you see, there are a couple different bounces. We did talk about this in a previous webinar, but it's okay to go over it again. So your bounces there's basically three different types. You have your soft bounce, which is a temporary failure. You have your hard bounce, which if it's your first time sending to them, it could very well be that it's a mistyped email address and it's a permanent failure. Not all the time does it mean that, but if it's the first time, that's something that you can kind of think of. And then lastly, is something that's unique to Benchmark is your confirmed bounce. Now, we will only drop, quote unquote, a subscriber into this confirmed bounce list if they've consecutively bounced 3 or more times, only then. And with that, when you send 3 or 4 campaigns to a list and you see that there's a group of individuals that are on that confirmed bounce, we can pretty much say that they're no longer available, they're invalid, and those are safe to remove, as long as you have everything in place properly and everything was working in normal stance before. Open rates, bounces, that kind of thing were all somewhat normal at the time. So definitely take that into consideration. We don't remove them for you. We only add them to this list and allow you to use that list cleaning feature to either remove them your own or place them on a different list and save those offline, however you want to do that. But it is a practice that you are manually doing yourself. All right, perfect. Okay, audio problem. Okay, that was good there.
While you're looking at the questions, I did see something yesterday that I really, really liked in the confirmed ballots list, is that for each address that's there, if you go to the far right and click on the 3 little dots, the ellipsis, you click on it, it will allow you to see what lists that contact is in. So you don't have to go, oh, I don't know what list this is, or what list did I send to recently? Are they in more than one list? You can actually check right from within the confirmed bounce list on the right, and it will let you know every list that that contact is in. So if you decide, okay, well, I'm gonna remove them now until I can figure out if they're still good or not, or maybe I wanna keep them, but I just wanna know what list they're in, you can do that.
Excellent. You know, that actually helps address part of one of the questions that we just received. And someone was asking, okay, so what happens if I notice that someone bounces, but they're on multiple lists? How do I know?
Yeah.
That right there is the way of knowing. You know, how list cleaning works is it's based off of list by list. So we do recommend that you go to each list and do this, but at least if you know that these groups of individuals, if they are bouncing like that, you have the ability of being able to go in and seeing what list that they're in. Now, we haven't really talked about client rating either yet. I think we're going to get to that here in a moment. So let's go ahead and let's continue. I don't see any other questions for now. Oh, here we go. So return of investment. So this, of course, is something that every marketer wants to know because they want to know what they're getting, what bang for their buck. What is that? Your return of investment. We kind of talked about this a little bit. It's obviously, you know, the easiest way of doing it is to think about how much time and effort you put in versus what are you getting in return in terms of value. That calculation is going to vary depending on you know, what you're doing with email marketing in general. If it's just newsletters, you're not really doing a lot of heavy promotions. You know, if you're really focusing on lead nurturing and getting that conversion, there's a lot of different ways of how people utilize email marketing. You know, feedback for one. I think that some feedback that you get is just invaluable. Surveying your customers after they make and complete a purchase, their responses to you about that experience that they had, it can be invaluable to you. So with those types of emails, I can't really, you know, give a number, a dollar amount of how much you actually earn from that, but you get a lot of peace of mind. Whereas your general marketing campaign, if it took you and your team 3 or 4 hours to put it together, and you sent it out and it made you $500 or $600, you know, that's a pretty good return of investment, depending on, of course, how many people were working on the email to create it to begin with. But when you think about that, you know, those are the metrics that you're really looking for. And some emails, they're just not designed to do that. They could just be to nurture a lead. They could just be to provide information, valued information. And the return would be that you're keeping people interested in your products and services or your content. I'm trying to think of anything else that I may have missed that's not the obvious around, you know, your return of investment.
Well, and there is information out there, and we had, I think we confirmed this a number of years ago. It may have changed, but some people who were doing well, the top people are actually getting a return of like $42.
Yeah. Per dollar
that
they've
spent
in email marketing.
on email marketing. Now, granted, it takes a little work initially to get to that, and you know, and it depends on what your product is, of course. But if you're following all of the advice that we're getting, you're going to get a positive return.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just not. A lot of people think it's just sending, and it's a little more than that, but it's not difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, and evaluate really touches on the topics that I think that are the most important when we think about what our next steps to be in email marketing. You know, if you're not evaluating what you've already done, how do you know where to go in the future? You know, you really got to take into account, you know, if you right now you may not know what the path of success is, and you may be on that journey of learning that, and that's something that you never want to lose touch with, because even companies that are well established like Benchmark, we're constantly reevaluating how we're email marketing. How effective is it? How can we capitalize? What are the stones that need to be turned over? You know, you're not going to know until you dive into it and start to play around, try something new. You know, A/B testing, those are something that a lot of times that, you know, you may be stuck with the same kind of subject line, and because you're doing these same type of emails. But an A/B test occasionally might help you understand, well, are you hitting your mark, or is there something else that can be done here to help intrigue people to want to click through and to go into your emails? Take that stuff into consideration.
Simple way to put it would be, what is performing?
Yes.
Yes. So if you don't know what's performing, A/B testing can help you understand what is performing.
Yeah, definitely. And it doesn't have to work just on a subject line solely. It could be campaign versus campaign, time and date in which a campaign was sent versus time and date of a different campaign.
Even an email address.
Oh, that's right. Even the email address. So the from address, we don't talk about this enough, but you guys may notice from receiving emails from Benchmark that we have sales at Benchmark, we have support, we have contact us, we have our newsletter, we have our blog, we have all these different channels of being able to respond to you and address emails from. Newsletters, of course, we found that it's best to always send for newsletter at benchmark.com or benchmarkemail.com. But we do have some newsletters that are written from our social media marketing manager or from our marketing director, and then we'll change the email address on there for those because it means something a little bit different. So good things to take into account there. Let's go ahead and continue to our next slide here. I think we're starting to get closer to our time. 15 minutes, perfect. So new leads generated. This is another one of those KPIs that I don't think a lot of people really take into account very often. I mean, they'll see their list grow over time, which is something great to see. You definitely want to know if you have, ads that are targeting social media. If you're not on that side of things and you're just using the free basic tools like sign up forms on social media, sign up forms on your WordPress or your site, your blog, sign up forms on LinkedIn or Instagram, something like that, and seeing how people are coming to you and sticking with you. Getting a lot of new leads is great. You can filter through a lot of people, but if people aren't sticking with you and staying on your list, is it really growing? A good thing to evaluate occasionally is to look at the stream in which you're getting new subscribers and what is the trigger, what's the hook, why are they signing up? Many of you may offer a free ebook or a download, something like that, and that was what got them to the sign up form to forfeit their information initially. Facebook might just be stay connected, something like that, and think about what's the message that you're sending to them after that. If they're signing up to your newsletter, are they interested in your blog? Are they interested in receiving your promotions? What other type of avenues can you start to market to them for? And really understanding people are coming in through your blog, but you're also seeing that they're really, they're engaged on Facebook, then you're understanding that you're hitting them on multiple avenues, you're getting them on multiple touch points, and that's great. You're getting people more engaged with that. Something else, Lisa, you were talking about the star rating. Do you want to kind of give a little bit of a breakdown of that and how that correlates to new leads?
Sure. Okay. So when you get a new lead, right, and they sign up into your list, and you don't know if one by one, nobody wants to look at every single email address individually. But if you just take a glance in your list, right? If you're looking at contacts and you notice the stars there, right? We have a star system based on how healthy your relationship is with that contact, right? So the more stars that they have, then you're going to be able to tell, are they opening? If they've opened once, every few emails, you're only going to see one star. They open more than that, you're going to see more stars. If they're clicking through, it's really going to jump up in stars. And you'll be able to sort your list based on this, so you're going to understand who your most engaged contacts are, and then you can target them specifically. Then you can use the targeting tool to gather those people and maybe send them a special promotion. Or maybe you're like, okay, my list isn't growing. It's not shrinking, but it's not really growing even though I have new signups. Well, then you'll be able to take that information and then you can retarget those people who are underperforming. So if you know it's not a bounce issue, right? You're not having issues with bounces, but you're still seeing list attrition that you would rather not have, then target those people for a special promotion, for a special email, just to try to re-engage them. Find out, maybe just ask them, number one, you can ask them if they want to stay on your list.
Yeah, there's no harm in that at all.
No harm in that at all. But a lot of times, maybe you want to ask them something a little bit more specific, just to make sure that you're targeting them properly, that you're giving them what they want.
Yeah.
So the star system is really good for that.
Yeah, and I mentioned briefly the stickiness. When you get a new lead, it's a crucial moment for them. What are the touch points? What are the things that you're doing? Taking into account that star rating and understanding where they're at in terms of engagement with you will help you understand where they're at in a buying process, potentially. Knowing if they're a real valuable lead or not, or if they're just another one of those looky-loos. Seeing that and targeting, capitalizing on that information, these key performance indicators, they're all going to mean something a little bit different to everybody. But ultimately, when we think about this and you're looking at new leads and trying to get conversions, what are the stepping stones that it's going to take for, the average person that visits your site or lands on your list? What are those stepping stones to getting them to a conversion? And are you looking for converting that person multiple times over and over and over? You're reselling to them, or is it just a one sell quit type of deal type of thing? Think about how that scenario works for you and your business, and really, think about what are those stepping stones, these key performing indicators. What do they mean to you? How can you capitalize on that? I want to make sure that we have enough time for questions and everything with everybody, so let's jump into the next slide here. Click to open. Now, we talked about click through. The click to open is going to be a little bit different. And sorry for those of you who've been through our other webinars, we did touch on both of these topics before, but when it comes to terms of evaluating, it is important to understand the difference between the two and understanding what to do with that data. The click to open, of course, is the click after they've opened. So before, the click through was just out of the number of people who received the email, who are the people that clicked. Now, the click to open is different. This is quantifying those who physically opened and who clicked through. So I like to think of this as the success. Where did they go? Why did they click? What were the reasons why they clicked? Those are your key performance indicators. The click itself after they open, the link, if it was a thumbnail, if it was a buy now button, if it was a read more, what does that mean in terms of the narrative that you're giving them, that story you're telling, where are they going on that path? These click to open rates, again, it's given to you in a percentage, and this is something that's always been up for debate a bit, but I like to think that generally, if you have 20% of people who opened the email, I like to think generally anywhere from, I like to think about 50% of people should be clicking through, and that's not always true. And Lisa was mentioning this before, and we do see a lot of people that send out an email campaign, and they might have 30 or 40% open rate, but yet they're only seeing 3 to 6% clicking through. That might be the placement of your call to action. It might be that email just wasn't a sales email. It wasn't an email to provoke them to go to another site. Those are types of things that might change that. And then Lisa, you were giving the scenario too about the wrong way of doing it, and kind of seeing that if you do see that a good decent number of people are opening but not clicking through, that's definitely something to evaluate and to think about content.
Right. So in that instance, you want to take a look at your content. If they're not coming through, if you're not getting at least 10%, you may want to reorganize it. Sometimes maybe moving the call to action up, maybe simplifying the email. If you're trying to target, maybe you just need to clarify your message.
Yeah, and that clarity is the number one thing too. It's so easy to be excited when creating content and want to add every little button you can, get all the products in there at once and find out which product do they want. And a lot of the times having too much of something like that, you may not be getting the best result from it. I like to think about things very black and white, just offer one or the other. When you start to offer all the spectrums in between, people become overwhelmed and they're less likely to choose something. And your next email can always do the same thing, but try 2 new products or 2 new services. Think about that. I love the Amazon thing where you buy something on Amazon and it says, oh, people who bought this also buy this. Think about that if you're offering multiple products. You know, you don't have to put all of your product lines all in the same email, though categories are good to understand what categories people want and use that KPI to remarket to them about the category that they chose. Very simple. You know, so keeping that narrative, that scenario in your mind about where is that end goal, how do we want to get them looped back in, you know, do people buy multiple products, do they buy separately, you know, what are those trends? And when you start to see those trends over time, that'll help you understand how to create better automations to target people, how to create more effective personalized emails that are really taking into account the click that they had. If someone's clicking through an email on a product, boy, your next email to them should be something to help nurture. If they didn't already buy that product, it should be something to nurture that product because they expressed interest in that. So you might as well give them more information, feed them what they want. You know, if they're not clicking on something, probably don't send them a follow-up on that, because if they clicked on something else, then, you know, really think about how that can correlate to your success in a conversion. Anything else we want to add to the click to open? I think we covered a lot of this in our previous one too.
Yeah.
So analytical improvement. So this is the thing that most of you guys have probably been waiting for, is what do you do when these types of things happen? Drop in open rates, an increase of bounces, or an increase of unsubscribes. Drop in open rates, this can mean a number of things, but you know, one of the first things that I always address is, has there been an average open rate? And establish what that average open rate is. If it's generally dropped dramatically from that average, I would definitely look at the list. I think the list is the first thing that I look at, is knowing when the last time it was verified. When was the last time it was cleaned? Also, how often is it used? Is it used regularly? If it's used once every 6 months, is it being cleaned? When was the last time it was verified? Knowing the status of your list, in my opinion, is everything. And we've said this before in other webinars, and I'll say it again now, and probably say it again in future ones, but something that we see in common with some of the great marketers that we've come across is that they all share the same characteristics of having impeccable list management skills. What that means is they know who's on their list, they know who's engaged, they're targeting those who are engaged, they have very low bounces. Unsubscribes tend to not really happen because they backed off on their marketing to those people to keep them on the list for longer periods of time. You know, so definitely keep that into account. You know, increase of bounces. Lisa, I'll let you kind of take this one too.
Right. So, well, we've covered bounces a lot, so I've got something a little bit different. The first point and the last point, targeting. Okay. If you're wondering about your KPI and you've got your bounces down to a reasonable level, if you don't, you know, we've got plenty of resources to help you get that done. Targeting will improve, without a doubt, your open rate and your unsubscribes. If you're having problems with unsubscribes, people are not engaged. If you don't know why they're engaged, try different strategies. You want to target them specifically. You want to target those people before you lose them, right? Yeah. Now, you don't want to keep them on your list forever and continue targeting. There's going to be a point where you're not going to be able to reach them. But if you haven't even tried it and you're just going, oh, well, they're not reacting, I'm going to get them off your list, you're going to lose money there. Don't do that. Yeah. So targeting will help your improvement.
Definitely. Yeah, and so unsubscribes, if you're seeing a large amount of those, you know, thinking about targeting is really important. Give people what they want. You know, doing general umbrella campaigns all the time, I don't recommend. They're great to, you know, showcase new products or services that you've added. You know, if you have an announcement, I like to think of what's the excuse of being in the inbox. If you don't have an excuse of being there, you really shouldn't be there. You know, you're just creating more content that's being sent to them, but you're not really, you know, growing from that. Retargeting people, creating smaller lists, smaller environments, you're going to capitalize a lot more on that. I do want to open up for questions and stuff. We're going to talk about a little bit more about targeting here in a second, but I do know that some of you guys may have things to do, and we're going to get to the top of our hour here. So if you guys do have any questions, feel free to go ahead and ask your questions in the control panel. We'll do our best to address those while we go over just the last topic here, and that's your targeting. So again, we covered some of the targeting in terms of segments. So again, here we'll go over like demographics. Something easy to think about. So those of you who might be selling nationwide, sending your email at a specific time. 9 a.m. is different on the East Coast than it is on the West Coast, and it's different in Mountain Time as well. Placement of your emails in the inbox is really important for you as well, especially if you have like a time-based agenda that's going on. If you have a promotion that ends on Friday, and it's Friday morning, when that email lands is really important. And so you might want to change your segmenting so you can schedule your email at 9 a.m. so that people on the East Coast get it at 9 a.m. and you'll segment for people that are on the West Coast that they'll get it at 9 a.m. So you can target those people based off of that time. Also understanding, where they're located, time zone, and not just time zone, but zip code, if that matters to you. Also creating that demographic there. Male, female, age demographics, those are also things to take into account as well. We talked about before with the bookstore scenario, and I'll give that really quickly. You offer six different books. First category is male or female, and the second category is the opposite of that. And then you have your third category, which is neutral. Depending on what book they choose, you can identify, okay, are they male, are they female, or are they neutral in that? And that'll help you understand. And then you can also choose the title based off the titles, whether they're targeting high school students, college students, or the average, the normal reader that just thinks about fiction, that kind of thing. You can start to figure out where people are in terms of their interest by the placement of your products. So think about how you're placing those there. I talked about the categories before. If you're selling things, shoes, shirts, blouses, whatever that might be, if you're primarily targeting females, offer them products that they're going to want to buy and want to click through. If they're male, same thing with them. If they're young, give them things that they're going to be interested in being young. If they're old, play to that field and whatever that is. So really know your demographic, know your audience, and create segments based off of that. Same thing goes for purchases and interests. We talked a little bit about those already. So keep that stuff in your mind for targeting. Segmenting effectiveness. So are there low performing segments? Lisa, I'm going to let you take this. What do you think about low performing segments?
It's
they them? I can't even talk. Are there any?
Low performing segments, yes. People who have never responded and you're not watching, if you're following best practices, then you're going to probably have low performing segments. It just means you're not targeting effectively. You're missing something in your equation. Segments in and of themselves are a way to target. So if you've got a segment and it's low performing, maybe you're not properly targeting them. So is it just you're just segmenting them based on the fact that they haven't opened an email? That would not be an effective segment
so that's more of the surface level. You want to get into.
Exactly. You need to understand more about that.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why you want to go back and you want to take a look at your reports. That's why you want to go back and you want to use these other tools instead of just going, okay, well, I'm going to segment these people and not really think about it. It's going to take a little bit more. Again, it's not hard, but I don't see people with problems with low performing segments unless they're just creating segments blindly. Most people are not doing that. Don't worry too much about that unless maybe you have some misunderstandings, and then please call us.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of an individual thing. So we would need to take a look at what you're doing and then help you understand maybe you're missing a point.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got in your plan, there's one key missing, we can help you figure out what that key is. Maybe not 100% of the time, but when it comes to deliverability and understanding how to use the tools within Benchmark and maybe some ideas that you could be using, we can help you with that.
And on the other side of the spectrum there too, for low performing segments, you could have something that has too much into it and you might be diving way too deep on things. And your segments, what you think and quantify are your KPIs. If you don't have something in form of evidence that shows that people go down this path on these KPIs to get this conversion, then you really don't know what the best thing is. And a lot of times what I see people do is they might over segment, they might drill way too deep into one thing and might be losing out on a huge group of people that actually would be somewhat interested in that buying process that you might not be getting and capitalizing on because you went way too deep into it. You know, I see that with segments a lot of the time with very large, big lists that people want to really drill down and segment to something. A lot of times it can work, you know, as long as you're not getting too far into it. But if you notice that you put all the effort into creating a segment and it didn't perform somewhat like you were expecting, it may be that you might have too many touch points. You might have too many things that are going to back off on a couple of them and try it again. And you might notice, you know, if that doesn't change anything and it got worse, then all right, maybe drilling into the specifics might be the better place to be. But again, what gets you here today may not get you there tomorrow. So reevaluating, understanding where people are, and, you know, really following what trends that you see for these conversions are really going to help you in the long run. And again, Lisa and I are here, always available for you guys. If you have questions, you want to talk shop, you guys want us to look at the reports, kind of go through the scenario, understand your business a little bit more, that's what we're here for. I think we're going to go ahead and open up for questions here. For those of you who have stuck around here, I appreciate that. I know we've gone a little bit over on our time, but we did get off to a rough start in the beginning there. I do see a question here. I won't say anybody's name or anything, but you're mentioning revolving around bounces and unengaged. Okay, so unengaged people don't necessarily mean it's a bounce at all. A bounce is a response back from the recipient server telling us that it was not delivered. Them being not engaged doesn't always mean that. Now, some cases, if someone is unengaged for a very long period of time, their email address might be static. Is that, maybe static is not the right word. They may no longer have that email address. It may become invalid. And at that point in time, it will bounce if it is coming back as deemed as invalid. Typically, for those who are growing a list 10 years old, 5 years old, and it's someone that has an old SBC Global or AOL, you know, address, and, you know, if you don't have any metrics that show that they've opened within the last 6 months, sending to them, you may see a hard bounce from that because that address may no longer be available, may no longer be around. So that is something that can happen. A way to identify that before you send would be to use list verification. That is a service that is a paid service. It's typically $3 per 1,000 units. That'd be 1,000 contacts. And excuse me, it's only offered to any of our pro packages. For those of you who are in our free plans and you're considering going into a paid plan, you're welcome to take advantage of a promotion that we have going on where we will actually verify up to 100,000 of your subscribers absolutely free if it goes towards an upgrade. And don't worry, for those of you who are in paid plans, we're still going to offer the same scenario for you guys as well, for those of you that are attending here with us today. So if you guys have questions about that and you want to take advantage of that, please let us know, and we'll be more than happy to connect you guys with that and get it done within an hour or so. All right, I'm going to kind of talk a little bit more about reasons why you'd want to upgrade. Here are some of the key reasons why we believe that you would want to upgrade. Ultimately, for a lot of you that are less than 50,000 subscribers, taking advantage of unlimited sending capabilities is a great feature to have. Also, having that benchmark logo removed is something else that you can have done. If you already haven't requested to have that done so yet, you may do so as long as you're in any of our upgraded plans. Unfortunately, for the free plans, it is one of the kickers that we do require to have that within the footer. Creating sub-accounts and master accounts, that's something else that is offered to any paid plan. Targeted emailing was one of those features that we talked a lot about today, and A/B testing. Those are two features that are only included within our pro plan, so do be aware of that. We did cover a couple of those topics today. Security Pen and Automation Pro. Automations are definitely an end goal where I see every marketer eventually being there. In the beginning, automations might not be something that you want to take advantage of quite yet, because it is something that you do need to know a little bit more of your proven process. You need to understand what your key KPIs are first before trying to capitalize on those. All right. So we're going to go ahead and leave it open for a couple more minutes just to have questions and stuff here for you guys. We'll be answering them privately, but we want to say thank you for attending. We will be jumping into our next webinar here next week, so stay tuned, and we'll be going ahead and talking about a bit about content. So for those of you who are interested in understanding a little bit more about content and placement and how that correlates to deliverability and the effectiveness of landing in the inbox, stay tuned, and you should be receiving a registration link here shortly.